Microsoft is entering the next generation of gaming with two consoles. First, we have the powerhouse Xbox Series X, which most people are going to buy. Then we have the Xbox Series S, which is a tough sell. More on that later. These consoles not only have super fast SSDs in them, but they have also been built around Microsoft's ecosystem. For the most part, they plan to live alongside PC and Xbox One family for a while too. How long will the Xbox One family stay around for? I don't know, but Microsoft promises that all first-party games like the delayed Halo Infinite will also release on the Xbox One family. For 2 years at least, I guess. Will they keep this promise? Probably not, as we have already seen games announced without Xbox One support. There's also Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which is a massive driving force for the entire ecosystem. It means no matter which Xbox console you own, a simple monthly payment will grant you access to hundreds of games, including the new first-party ones, when those arrive. In short, Microsoft has created the Netflix of gaming, and it works pretty well with the next-gen consoles. With that being said, so much of the next-gen experience from these devices feel like nothing has changed. The Xbox controller feels and looks almost identical to the previous model, and the UI and interface are the same. The true generational jump began the moment I launched the game. Snappy performance, crazy short load times, and of course higher resolution at higher frame rates. This is where you'll experience the next gen on the Xbox Series consoles. It was as if I shoved the GPU and SSD into my Xbox One. Of course that would be impossible, and it would also be impossible to buy a GPU as powerful as the Xbox Series X and S. With that asking price, these two consoles offer some fantastic value for the money. While much of the Xbox experience remains intact with these next-gen consoles, the devices themselves feature an impressive look. The Xbox Series X and its monolith design towers above my TV shelf, and anyone who saw it knew exactly what it was. The all-black design works, and the console has been built with cooling and performance in mind. On the front, there's very little. We have a disk drive, eject button, sync button for remotes, a USB 3.2 port, and the power button that lights up. On the top, there are vents which bevel inwards, and thanks to the green inner plastic, it looks like there's a glow from the top of the device. It would have been really cool to have an actual green light here, but we can't get everything. The console is also hefty and weighs 4.45 kgs. It stands 30 cm tall and is 15 by 15 cm thick. The left and right sides are blank, and there's business in the back with all the ports. Here there's an Ethernet, HDMI, power, and two USB 3.2 ports. There's no USB Type-C here at all, which is kind of a letdown, especially if you have an external SSD that you want to use to store games on. We all know that Type-C provides faster data transfers, so while you could not play the games from it, at least you could have copied the games back and forth. Lastly, there is a storage expansion slot. Here you will insert the storage accessory. I did not get one of these to test with the console as of this review, only Seagate are making them. However, Microsoft says that more brands are working on their own. Positioning the Xbox Series X is completely up to your personal preference. On the bottom, there's a rubber circular stand that cannot be removed. This meant I just stood up the console at all times. It looks more natural this way in my opinion. However, there are also 4 feet on each side so that you can lay it down. I just could not bear looking at it this way. It looks so strange, and the fact that the stand juts out of the side makes it even worse. The Xbox Series S is a day and night difference when it comes to the design. Microsoft didn't just make a smaller X, they made a tiny little white box that is shockingly small in person. The white design is great, and the more I looked at it, the more I wanted a white Series X. On the top, there's a record player-like black vent, and both the left and right hand sides are vented too. The front is super clean with a power button, a USB 3.2, and a sync switch. If you don't know by now, it has no disk drive, but more on that later. On the back, it too has a storage expansion slot, 2 USB 3.2 ports, Ethernet, HDMI, and of course a power port. Both consoles lack optical out if any of you are wondering. This means if you rely on the port for sound, you may need to invest in a new sound system. Overall, I fell in love with both consoles' designs. I never thought I would, but when I set it up on my TV shelf and had to move my TV over to the other side because I ran out of space, it just worked. It is not only impressive on the outside, but considering the Series X is just a box, the internals must be stacked quite well too. Then there's the Xbox Series X and S controller, which as I mentioned before are quite familiar. There are some changes though, including a share button that let me take a screenshot at any time, and holding down the button recorded 15 seconds of gameplay, which I could adjust. Then there's the new matte finish that helps with the controller's grip, and textured grips that feel great too, and the triggers are thinner with their own texture too. There's also this new D-pad which is round. It gives you more control over the movements, but honestly I didn't really notice anything magical about it. And yes, it still uses AA batteries, but you can pick up battery packs for it too. Booting up both consoles welcomed me to a brand new boot logo. It is fantastic and subtle. Definitely much better than that obnoxious Xbox One X boot sequence. The console literally boots in a few seconds, and it only took about 20 seconds to boot to the dashboard. This is even shorter than the entire Xbox One X boot animation. If you can't tell, I really hate that animation. Often, my TV would not even turn on in time, and both consoles were waiting on the dashboard for me. Before we get into the dashboard itself, I need to mention how quick and easy the initial setup process for the consoles were. Microsoft now lets you set up everything by using an app. You enter a code on the app and everything transfers over. My Microsoft account signed in, I could even connect to my Wi-Fi on the app too. It is so fast and not to mention accessible for all users. As I mentioned before, there's nothing wow about the Xbox Series X and S UI. I immediately knew where to go, how to access stuff and tweak my settings. While familiarity is great, I kinda miss that sense of discovery you get when buying new hardware. The only real new thing to discover here were the dynamic wallpapers, which were all animated and fancy-like. These change depending on your color. A few subtle changes are available on the new consoles. For example, you can filter your games to which are enhanced for the Series X and S, and there's also an icon on the games which you cannot launch if they are on an external hard drive. In the settings, there's also a new option for 4K 120Hz, which I tested out and will get back to in a bit. The most impressive part of the UI is just how fast it is. Sure, Microsoft improved the speed of the dashboard over the past few years, but this is just damn impressive. There's no waiting for anything to load. Menus simply open and going in and out of games is just a breeze. As I said, there's nothing new to run and test out when it comes to the dashboard, but maybe that's okay too. One thing is for sure, the Xbox Series X and S are two very fast machines. Yes, even that tiny little white box is just as fast. The Series X packs an 8-core AMD Zen 2 processor running at 3.8 GHz, a custom RDNA 2 AMD GPU that puts out 12 teraflops of processing power, 16 gigs of DDR6 RAM, and a custom 1 TB NVMe SSD. As for the Series S, it is a little weaker of course, but mainly in terms of the GPU. It has an 8-core 3.6 GHz AMD Zen 2 processor, a custom RDNA 2 AMD GPU that puts out 4 teraflops of processing power, 16 GB of DDR6 RAM, and a 512 gig SSD. There's also no disk drive, which should be quite clear by now. Without any games on the console, the Series X has about 802 GB of free storage, and the S has a shocking 354 GB free. While the Series X has ample storage, the S might be an issue, but we'll touch on that in a bit. Whatever I threw at these consoles, they knocked it right out the park. Enhanced games load at impressive rates, so much so that Forza Horizon 4 barely gets to show the load screen before it fast travels to where I clicked on. Gears 5 wastes no time too. While the game's intro takes forever due to the unskippable breaking of the ice scene, the game is fast. Clicking on Start Game, it only takes 8 seconds to load into the campaign. However, the speed was felt throughout every game and not just the enhanced ones. Backward compatible games greatly benefited from the console's power too. Testing Xbox 360 games, we can now kiss loading screens goodbye. The longest I had to wait was when the cloud saves were downloading off my account. Left 4 Dead loads into missions within 5 seconds and gameplay is extremely smooth. This is going to make revisiting older games a real joy. If you enjoy going back and playing them, that is. Here are some tests I performed across enhanced games, Xbox One and 360 games when it came to load times. These tests were almost identical across both the Series S and X, and you can see the results on your screen right now. General improvements to old games are one thing, but the enhanced games are another. I played a lot of these during my review of the consoles, and I was very impressed. Gears 5 looks fantastic, loads fast, and feels super smooth to play. Forza Horizon 4 looks better than ever, and as I mentioned before, the load screen should not even exist in that game now. Sure, none of these games have been built just for the console, and I so wanted to experience something just next gen, but that's not how Microsoft rolls. Gaming on the Xbox Series X and S is great. When playing non-enhanced games, notable improvements can be seen throughout the experience. Frame rates are smoother and resolution is sharper. Not to mention everything is a lot faster. Doom Eternal loaded within 10 seconds, Final Fantasy 15 runs beautifully on the frame rate option without ever dropping frames, and if it was not for a lack of in-game detail, you would swear it was running on a high-end PC. The closest next-gen experience I had was when I played games at 4K 120Hz, and even those were extremely limited. Gears 5 and Dirt 5 are the only 2 games at the moment that support this feature. However, I do have to say that playing console games at 120Hz on a 65-inch TV was a dream. I tested these on a Sony Bravia X900H. When enabled on Dirt 5, on the other hand, Gears 5 is a different story. The 120Hz is exclusive to the multiplayer mode and it looks fantastic. Here this mode makes sense as movement is faster, felt better, aiming was more precise, and I felt as if I had more control over my character. The overall visual quality also held up pretty well when enabled. I was very impressed. I look forward to seeing which games will make use of this mode in the future, as I can see this feature being killer for next-gen consoles. Then we have the quick resume, and while it was limited to specific games during the review process, it's almost like magic. The feature allows up to 5 games to sit suspended in the background while you play through them. I loaded Gears 5, played a bit, and without closing it launched Gears Tactics. I then felt like finishing the chapter in Gears 5, and without closing Tactics simply clicked on the Gears 5 logo and it immediately resumed from where I left it. Not only is this an impressive way to switch between games, but it's also very fast. When I had multiple games on the back burner, it took max 10 seconds to switch from one to the other, and even faster when playing Xbox 360 games. It was almost like using a smartphone and multitasking between WhatsApp and Twitter. Only this time you are switching between high-end video games. Mostly every game I tested used this feature, besides Forza Horizon 4, which was an early access enhanced game, so it made sense. If you spot a game that does not work with this feature, I'm sure Microsoft will patch it soon. Now I have to mention the few times that the limited storage space on the Xbox Series S may be an issue. It only has 346GB of storage space to begin with. You can fit a few games on that. However, there's also the Smart Delivery, which is literally a smart delivery system for your console. If you do end up buying the S, your game files will be a lot smaller than the X when you download them. This only works for some games. For example, Sea of Thieves on the Series X was 46 gigs, but on the S was 17 gigs. Gears 5 was 71 gigs on the X and 55 gigs on the S. I was pleasantly surprised to see how greatly reduced Series S games were in file size compared to the X. This is great and all, but the Series S SSD is still very small. Not to forget, it does not have a disk drive, so be prepared to live your life copying games back and forth from an external hard drive. It may not happen now or in 6 months' time, but it will happen. Unless you fork out the extra $4,000 for the storage expansion, but then you might as well buy the Series X with double the space. Everything about the Xbox Series S works against it. You could live off an external hard drive, but there's no USB Type-C, so copying files is not going to be the fastest. You can't use disks, so deleting games in hopes of installing them again without the need to download them is also not going to happen. Don't get me wrong though, the Xbox Series S has some fantastic performance that is quite impressive for its size. Games load extremely fast and look great for its limited 1440p max resolution. There's also some rough edges you would have to look past when playing this console on a 4K TV. I'm sure there's a target market out there for this, but you seriously need to weigh up how much you'll spend on storage expansions or how much patience you have to re-download all the games. While the Smart Delivery is quite a fantastic system, it won't save that little 346GB SSD from filling up. For 6,999 Rand, it is a steal, but you need to know what you're getting yourself into. I never thought I would enjoy the Xbox Series X as much as I did, but this has been my first real taste of next gen. It is a powerful console that performs extremely well. Games look beautiful, run smoothly, and you can't even begin to imagine the amount of time you will save not waiting for things to load. It has been built with love and passion and is one stylish black box, that is for sure. I don't have the fancy equipment to scan for resolution and dips in frame rates, but I can tell you this machine is a gem. I do have some concerns though. We have still yet to see the fruits from all these studios Microsoft has acquired in the past few years. I so wanted a game to play that I had never played before. I wanted to boot up a crazy impressive experience that would blow me away thanks to it being developed just for this console. I wanted a game that I would remember this launch for. Yes, Gears 5 is cool and Forza is pretty, but it has all been done before. Don't get me wrong, having these games is of great value, but how many times do I need to replay Gears 5? I know I will probably eat my words in a year's time. So do you buy it? Well, that's completely up to you. The console is a big generational leap, and I can never see myself going back to the Xbox One. In addition, it is powerful, looks great, and is pretty affordable for the tech that's inside of it. Microsoft has a lot cooking up for us at all those studios, and I cannot wait to see what comes out of all of it. But that's going to wrap up all our thoughts on the Xbox Series S and X. What do you guys think? Let us know down below. You can also find all our relevant links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing, and until next time, farewell.